Welcome to another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. I have the Cybersecurity Super Recruiter on today, right on time.
Right on time.
How are you doing today, Renee Small?
I am well. How are you, sir?
I am doing fantastic, actually. Doing great. Doing
Good
great.
stuff.
Um, so we are the tech. We're on the techbehindfintech.com where we talk about the technology news, the technology news behind fintech. I'm very passionate about our discussions. Today we want to switch it up a bit and talk about the HR side. Actually, we see a lot of things happening with recessions and layoffs. So we have Renee Small on. Let me read her bio because it is pretty impressive. Cybersecurity Super Recruiter Renee Small helps people take the mystery out of breaking into cybersecurity. She's passionate about building best-in-class cybersecurity teams. In 2017, Renee received the Stevie Award for Female Entrepreneur of the Year. She's a #1 Amazon best-selling author for The Magnetic Hiring, a contributing editor to several cybersecurity magazines, and she co-hosts a podcast called Breaking into Cybersecurity. How are you doing today, Mrs. Smalls?
I am doing fantastic. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, man, doing well. I'm doing well. I know we probably said that before, but that's a common thing. It's like the 20 how are you doings and things like that. So for those
Right.
that don't know, Renee and I are extremely close. Go back for a long time. Go back since high school. We're not going to say years though, right?
Yeah, you're not giving up the full depth, the full length, the full depth.
Nothing. So definitely no
But I
no
will
need.
say I knew
Okay.
Nnamdi when he had dreads.
Oh wow. But you know what though? You know what? We call them locks though. We call them locks. But yes. So yeah, so it's definitely been a long time if you take it back that far because
His
now
hair
I
was
am
much longer than mine.
it was down to the middle of my back. So
Yes.
we're saying trade secrets here from back in the days. Okay. Um I think those pictures are somewhere. What happened, we didn't have social media back then.
Right.
So a lot of those pictures are in a box in my mom's basement. So I don't have a lot of pictures posted with that look. But in any event, back to business. So today's conversation, I'm really excited for recession-proof your career in fintech. Obviously, we see things happening. We see massive layoffs throughout the industry for certain fintech firms and also technology firms in general. Let's get some latest stats involved. Let me add this to the screen. Tech companies laid off more than 7,000 workers a few weeks ago. In May and June, we've seen companies like let's get it. Doma, number of employees laid off, 310. That Doma is a financial services firm focused on home purchase strategic initiatives. Klarna, we've seen this happening a lot in the buy now, pay later space. Number of employees laid off, 700. Klarna is a Swedish payments giant that has laid off about 700 employees, 10% of their workforce. They cite Russia's war in Ukraine and inflation. Bolt Financial in May 2020, in May, laid off 400. Coinbase recently in June 20. We talked about this a few weeks ago. They had a hiring freeze and they rescinded some offers. Now they laid off 1,100 people, 18% of their workforce. So I think this conversation is extremely timely, and I want to jump into it. What's your
Yeah.
take? What's your take on the industry? What's going on right now? First off,
Yeah, for sure. So, and thank you for those statistics. It just really shows a picture of what is happening in technology, in the world, to be honest, because now everything is global. And this recession is impacting, or I guess we're not technically in a recession.
oh yeah, okay. We're saying the recession word right now. Yes, that's
Right, but it looks like it's inevitable, and I mean, we'll see what happens after. I believe the numbers come out again July 4th. So after Q2 or after July 4th, and we find out. where we are. But yeah, so you have industries that are more recession proof than others. And so there are, we've been through this. The folks that have been around a few minutes have been through a couple of recessions, 2001, 2008. And now this one that I believe probably would have happened right around COVID, that, or that dip. And now, what we're heading into in, the next 1 to 2 years or less. And so it's a great time to look at some of the industries and look at some of the types of roles, and see how we can buffer for that, and look at some of the places where the recession isn't, I mean, it impacts us all, but it impacts some industries in some areas less than others. So we're going to go through that. That's really what I want to talk about today. Like we've seen the layoffs happen. The one thing about, the space that I play in, which is in security, haven't seen much in the security space. Security just has such a lack of talent that even when companies are doing layoffs, they're already down staff in security. Security, as of right now, from what I'm seeing in the market, it's not being impacted yet. But yeah, some of those other companies where they had either layoffs happening and or offers rescinded, which is a tough one when you left your other company or you've given your notice, and then they put the offer out and then they turn around and rescind the offer. That's always difficult. Nnamdi, you want to add something?
Yeah, I have some questions. I mean, we're gonna get into it, but I also have some questions on how people can protect themselves from that situation. Because I think it literally. Someone asked me that it literally came up in a conversation, and I'm really interested in, like, how do you protect yourself from that situation? That's like, well, it's a few questions going to come out from our discussions. Before we get into it, let me do some housekeeping first off. So listen. We are streaming live right now from LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. We also have a side camera going on Instagram. If you're watching this on Instagram, definitely thank you for viewing. If you want to ask questions, you can go to our Tech Behind FinTech website. It's streaming live there, and you can ask questions, and we'll post you on the show. And we'll periodically turn to Instagram. But if you want to ask questions, definitely go to Tech Behind FinTech, press play, and ask your questions. Everyone else on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, you ask your questions directly. We'll see it on the platform we use, and we'll post it so everyone can see the question and Renee can answer. So before we get into it, though, you brought up that in a situation like that, someone's working at a firm. Now they go interview, looks like everything's working out. They get the job, everything's great, everything's negotiated, and then the offer is rescinded. How can one protect themselves from that?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if you can.
Really?
Like, how would you wouldn't know. I mean, there's a level of research that you want to do on the companies. But these companies were all booming. 2 months ago, Coinbase and some of the other ones that you were talking about, they were just hiring in droves.
Yeah.
So the only thing I can say is to do as much research as you can, go on Glassdoor, tap into your network and see what's happening in the company, if people are hearing rumblings of anything. But there's no real way to know if your offer that you just, that was just extended is going to be rescinded. Like, I don't even know how you would be able to protect yourself against that, even with all the research.
Is it something you could put in your contract? Because what some people will do, I mean, the argument there is then they wouldn't leave their current situation, right, until day one they start working. So, or then they'll give notice. But because it's obviously a predicament, especially in this environment, and it's happened with Coinbase, that someone can fall into. So I was just curious to see what are the protections in that, and obviously there's no legal recourse, I assume.
I don't know. You know what? I haven't researched that to see
Okay.
what people have done in those types of scenarios. I know when it's like executive level roles and there's so much at stake, they do provide, a lot of times they'll provide some kind of verbiage in the contract that pretty much says if, you know, if something happens within the first X amount of period of time and it's not due to the individual, then they get a certain percentage of their compensation or a payout or something like that, what they call the golden parachute for some of these, like, you know, these executives that are hired. And then one recently was hired and I think the next day got laid off or fired or something. And they only, like, the CFO of a company, I can't remember which one, but that was recent because, and it was it made the news because it was a 1 day job, and I think the person was paid millions of dollars because that was
Yeah.
in the contract. Um, so or the contract said that this person was going to get these millions. So at the executive level, I have seen things written into contracts, but at the individual contributor or, you know, middle management level, I am not sure if there's anything that can be done and the kind of recourse. I mean, the only thing potentially people can do is, and this is a good segue into keeping your being professional and keeping your professional contacts, like, you know, walking off or leaving in a negative way will have your current employer not want to bring you back on. However, I've been in situations where, or I've seen situations where a person was hired into a role, and for all types of unforeseen circumstances, they were either the offer was rescinded or they went and they worked for a couple weeks and it didn't work out, and they were able to go back to their old job. Um, and that's because they had the good relationship with the manager and they left on a good note. And you know, the manager understood that they were losing really great talent, but for better, what was going to be a better opportunity, and they were able to go back. So all I would say is to be as professional as possible when you are leaving opportunities. You know, give the 2 weeks notice. You know, do your transition plan. Just be a great colleague so that if anything goes wrong on the other side, you could potentially just go back to your former employer.
No, that's a great tip, for sure. Let's we have a comment from the audience. Let's post a comment. Listen, these types of conversations we like to keep extremely interactive. So if you have questions, comments, please feel free to post them in the chat, and we will put them on the screen, and our expert here will talk about it. So a comment from Abera Okoye, cousin, actually. I love it. She's watching it. Awesome. A brilliant accountant
Love that.
as well, wealth building CPA. Quick shout out. All right. So emergency savings, 3 to 6 months from a financial standpoint. I mean, yeah, right.
Yeah, that's such a valid point.
Gas prices are high, groceries are high. Like most people, do they even have 3 to 6 months right now, based on everything going on with the economy and things of that nature? A lot of people are living, lifestyles that are somewhat check to check. I don't believe in that concept, but that's just the state of the world we live in. So having
Yeah.
half a year worth of savings to support yourself, I don't know if a lot of people fit into that category. I mean, what are your thoughts?
I don't know either. I believe I saw something that said people have less than, you know, certain parts of the country have less than 5,000, have less than a
Oh yeah.
$1,000. I mean, all types of different statistics. I wouldn't know. Barry would probably know better than me, but it's a good concept. It's definitely something that we should all strive to have. If we have 3 to 6 months of financial emergency savings, then it's not like, you know, your life is going to crash down if, you know, you leave one job and you're out of a role for a little while. um I can't say, like, in terms of technology though, the most of the skills, and again, I try to stay very, very much in my lane, which is in the security and, other technology spaces. I'm not seeing a slowdown in hiring. We've seen, like, some of my clients right now, they are laying off. They're laying off in other areas of the company, but when it comes to technology and it comes to security, it's like they're hiring and ramping up in those areas. So
It's interesting, right, that you brought that up because, like, in this one situation, I have this article. Do I have an article somewhere? I don't. Oh man. But yeah, there was a situation where have it in the show notes. A company, we talked about this too, and I want to bring this back up. So at the same time, Klarna and other fintechs and cryptos are laying off, a company called Revolut. It's a $33 billion digital banking startup. Said the company is actively hiring with over 250 open roles listed on its website. Another fintech company, Wise, their CEO, they're based in London. It's a money transfer firm. They say they're in a different place. Years of building Wise as a profitable long-term company is paying off now. So much demand for international banking. We can't hire people fast enough to build it. Um, Meanwhile, a German bank, N26, said it had no current plans to reduce headcounts. The firm was last valued at 9 billion. So, I mean, just to your point, there are layoffs going on in the fintech space, but some companies who maybe looked at the long game, they seem to be hiring in record amounts. So, I mean, the economy it's very interesting just to see both shifts. But you know, some markets like the buy now, pay later. Some markets in the crypto space, in terms of the bubble and everything just shrinking. I mean, especially with buy now, pay later and interest rates going up, impacted their business. But
right.
back to the topic at hand, though, recession proofing your career. I mean,
Yeah.
looking at the individual itself, like what can the individual do?
Right. So a couple things that I looked up in preparation for this. So, in general, I would always say people should always be thinking about other opportunities, entertaining other opportunities, just always kind of being, like they say, game ready, like, interviewing, having informal conversations. I'm a fan of that just in general so that you don't feel like you're so rusty when it comes to having to make a move. Like if your job, thinking forward thinking. So if your job was to lay you off, now what? So planning for that and having a robust network, continuing to do, I mean, Nnamdi, you're fantastic about this podcast. So if you have some kind of social media, social presence, if you're networking within your industry, like ramp that up, keep that going, because those are the folks you're really going to need to lean on your network when it comes time to looking for new opportunities. So, those are some of the things that I would tell folks just in general. I like to keep that going regardless of um if you're in your career or not. Um it just I feel like it just keeps you fresh. Like, and it doesn't have to be roles all the time where you are active. You're definitely not actively looking, but when people start to reach out to you, take the phone call, listen to what's going on in the industry, hear what people are saying, have informational and informal conversations with leaders who are looking for your type of skill set. I'm just a huge fan of that. You were gonna say something?
Yeah, interesting. So, let's you know me personally, so I'm about fitness, I'm about doing reps and doing all this stuff. But in thinking about what you said, right, especially with the interviewing process, how often should a person do that, right? So, like they have a job, they're not interested in leaving, but to your point, right, keeping that skill set in terms of learning how to present yourself. So not getting rusty in that aspect when people ask you about your profession and really you're really in a sales role in a sense, but you're selling
Correct.
yourself. How often should a person do that? Is it like, oh, they should at least have a conversation a month, every quarter, every
I would
6 months? Like,
yeah.
what are your thoughts?
I mean, I would be doing it I'd be doing it often. Obviously, you don't want to have interviewing impacting your job,
Of
but
course.
on a consistent basis, like if someone reaches out to you, and I know that recruiters reach out to security technology people all the time. But when the role looks interesting, have a conversation. So I would say once a month, have a conversation, listen to what the recruiter is saying, listen to what maybe a hiring manager, if a hiring manager is reaching out to you, or an internal uh internal HR and recruiting people are reaching out. Have a conversation. It doesn't hurt anyone. You build your network. You can tell them you're not really actively looking. I hear that all the time. I mean, I recruit people all day, every day, and the vast majority of folks are not really actively looking. But
And then you twist
some,
their arm, and then all of a sudden,
I've been told I do that.
not actively looking, and all of a sudden, 2 weeks, you give me 2 weeks notice. But I mean, that's your profession. That's what you do. So, but no, but interesting thing. I really, because I don't think a lot of people actually do that. You know,
They
I don't.
don't.
So that's
A
why I
lot of
wanted to
people don't.
circling back on that
Yeah.
suggestion you made. So they're extremely rusty, and a lot of people
Right.
don't do it. They have no intention of necessarily leaving their current situation. So that's why they
Right.
don't even entertain those conversations. But
No, they
it,
should. And even if you don't have you don't, you just want to see what the market is bearing. Like, people get so sometimes bitter is, I guess, the wrong word to use, right word to use, but especially people that have been in roles for a longer time. And then, especially with in technology in particular, in this current market, like the salaries jump, things jump. So if you were at your company 5 years ago and you've been getting these small, payments, 2%, 3% raises, whatever it is, and now we have inflation that's at 8 point something percent, and you're looking at your salary, and you're kind of, you've outgrown your role, you're kind of, looking for the potentially, maybe not necessarily looking, but frustrated in your current situation. And then when somebody does call you, you just sound like, you sound like a bear jumping through the phone, because you're so frustrated. So this is why I always, it's just good to have market intel. Like, when someone calls, finding out what's the competitor paying. Nowadays, if someone calls or reaches out or emails or whatever, and you pick up the phone, you have the conversation, or you have the email conversation. um just learning, like, what the market is bearing in terms of compensation. Like, what do you have? What are you leaving on the table? Now, granted, we all know compensation isn't everything. So if I have to go travel, if I have to be, if I'm in a role and it's relatively stable, and I have my life set up and my lifestyle and everything's working out well, and I'm okay, and I'm getting paid a little bit less than, company B, that is going to have you travel all around the place, and they're going to pay you, but you're going to work for that money. um you can see what the market is bearing, but you definitely just want to be abreast of what's happening, um for just a number of reasons. You want to see if you're really true, if you're underpaid, if you feel undervalued, underpaid, which is what we hear a lot in technology, especially the undervaluing piece. In technology, we hear that a lot from candidates. Growth opportunities. There's just so many other things. So you want to keep your eye out and see what's happening in the marketplace. And it is good to just build that network. Like, I mean, if nothing else, you have another contact that's connected to a position that you can hopefully call on when you are ready, in a couple of months, or refer other people. So it's just a good practice to have. And again, like you said, the reps, like, just not being rusty when somebody asks you about your career. Like, if I get on the phone with someone and I say, tell me about yourself, or what have you been doing in what's your current situation? And they don't even know where to begin, because you just haven't been talking about this topic of your, to another professional outside of the people that you work with. You definitely want to, you want to, you want to do that. You want to just have that ready. You want to have your what do they call it? It's your, like, almost like not really an elevator pitch, but something that it concisely says, this is what I do.
Penny, she's saying great advice. She said nice, and she said great advice. No, I mean, in how you're describing it, to me, it sounds like it literally sounds like sales. It sounds
Yeah,
like
you have to sell yourself.
pipeline. You're having a pitch, and you're getting smoother in your delivery. But in saying that, I don't think a lot of people who are employees necessarily look at themselves as salespeople. Um, what you're saying, in my personal belief, is that they should, right? Because the only difference between them and someone working at a vendor or wherever is that you're literally selling yourself, and you have to figure out how to do that.
That's correct. So, most employees are not looking at themselves as that at all. And they don't necessarily have to be that, but you do have to be able to sell yourself. You have to be able to convince someone to take the next step with you, on a journey of potential hiring, more conversations. And again, it's not all the time like a hard job or a hard situation. I'm just a huge fan of, um, I love informational interviews where you're learning more about other parts of the industry or other parts outside of like what you do. So go ahead.
First time I'm actually hearing the term informational
Informational.
interview. So can you, like, what's the difference between an informational interview and just a regular interview?
Yeah, so informational is just purely to learn about, a role that you may not know anything about, or just a little bit of information. Like, say you did some research on a specific position. Let's say you want to become a cloud architect, and so you connect with someone who hires cloud architects. You're not a cloud architect yet, but you want to learn from them in terms of the information, like what is it that I need. These are the skills that I have. This is some of the work that I've been doing. What kinds of, what are the types of people, or the types of people, what are the types of skill sets that you would hire, Mr. Manager, Mrs. Manager, Mrs. Architect Manager. What kinds of skills do I need to build up to become a cloud architect? And those are great conversations to have. Most of the time, I would say to do those within your current company. So if you're in technology right now in one area and you want to learn more, it's usually easier to do it when you're inside of a company, having like, a 15-minute chat, whatever you want to call it. But informational interviews, really understanding that person is learning about you, you're showing interest in that role. And especially in these large companies, that's the way internal mobility works. So you can, and I'm sorry, I'm using tech HR terms, internal movement, like internal moving
Yeah.
from job to job inside of the same company.
Super basic question, right?
Mhm.
How does one even set up an informational interview?
So you would reach out to, say you're inside this company, you want to learn more about being a cloud architect. You can just purely say to the cloud architect leader, hi, I'm Renee. I work in X department, or I've touched your role. I'm adjacent to what you do. Like some of my team members have worked with you or whatever. And I wanted to learn more about, I'm looking into becoming a cloud architect. And I would like to learn more about what you look for in your talent or people that you hire or whatever in in this person's words. And I can't even imagine someone not saying, yes, I want to have that conversation. I mean, I would have people when I worked inside of a corporation, I would recommend that to people all the time. Go and meet with the manager, write the manager a note, tell them this is where you would like to be, or this is what you're looking towards. You don't even know yet if that's what you want to do, but you have these skills. You think this is really interesting. You see this is all these companies are moving to the cloud or already in the cloud. This is what you would like to do. You want to have a quick conversation. Nobody's going to sit with you for an hour. I mean, some people might if they're verbose, but 15, 20 minutes on somebody's calendar, they're going to say yes.
Awesome. All right. So look, what do we have so far? I know I want to be conscious of your time, so I know you have to get back to it. What do we have so far?
Okay, so a couple
Information-
things.
I'm sorry.
What's
We
up?
have informational interviews. We have taking actual real interviews just to keep that skill
Yes,
set up on
keep
a
it going.
if like a monthly thing with no intention of taking a job, but it's literally practice for you to just get better at selling yourself and interviewing, right?
Yep.
Um, what else do we have?
And what
Yep,
tends to happen sometimes, this is why I push it,
they're
is
talking to
that
you.
right. Then they end up right. They talking to me, hey, have a conversation. It's 15 minutes off your life. And what are you gonna do with the 15 minutes anyway? And then they have this conversation, and somebody that was not looking for a position all of a sudden is like, wow, this is fantastic. Like I think I really like this, what they have going on over there. And then off you go, and you very well may end up with an offer. Now, granted, you don't have to take that offer either. Like I tell people all this stuff, you don't have to, like, none of this is set in stone. You don't have to take offers. You don't have to, some people in their mind, it's like they go down the road of, I accept a position, or taking an interview in their mind is getting a job offer and taking the job offer. That's not the way it works. So the folks who are seasoned at this, that just, do interviews and things like that on a regular basis, they understand that's not the case. They'll take an interview, doesn't sound good, every once in a while, something sounds really interesting. They'll have a conversation. But they realize that they can turn down offers. Nobody has handcuffs on you. Nobody is like, twisting your arm too much to take the job. So go ahead, Nnamdi.
I just think it's a really fascinating concept of just doing it, even like literally with no intention of taking a job, but just to build that skill set. I keep harping back on it because I'm blown away by that. I think it's straightforward. It's not overly complex, but it's like extremely valuable in terms of advice. So, what are some other tips in terms of recession proofing your career?
Yes. So there's some organizations or some industries that are recession proof. And if you're in these industries, you want to stay in them for the foreseeable future, because Coinbase may be laying off, but your local hospital is likely not laying off people, right? The medical industries. Um, and I have a couple here that I pulled up. Where is it?
So,
Uh,
are you saying if someone's in a technologist in a certain vertical, switching
mhm.
verticals?
Potentially, if you
Interesting.
see, you can start networking. And again, you don't necessarily have to take immediate action. But if you see that, if you think that things at your company are looking shaky, and nobody does, or people typically don't do X in the recession, if you're in a company that is, I guess, something that folks don't necessarily buy into during a recession, like they said, luxury goods, there's certain things that come, it contracts when a recession shows up. um and so you want to, stay away from those. Oh wow, Barry says accounting industry lost 40% of its workforce.
Hey, I didn't know that. Did
I
they
didn't know
all
that either.
to the IRS? Joke.
Right. Did the government hire
Joke.
them?
Scratch that. That was purely a joke. um, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
What do you call it?
So I would
Yeah.
say healthcare is definitely one area. People are going to, I joke around. I have a friend who is my other Nnamdi is my male BFF, and then I have a female BFF. And I talked to her about her industry, and she sells wearable defibrillators. And I was like, well, it's gonna be the health industry, people are going to stress out. Like, you're more likely to have these certain industries where folks are getting stressed out. Healthcare, regardless of the stress, people are going to get sick regardless. people are going to have to go to the doctor regardless. You have to, your standard checkups, all that stuff. All of that is definitely happening. So healthcare is a huge industry to be in during a recession.
I think she meant with the 40%. So retirement and no new entrants. So we are recession proof from an accounting. It's possible to have two career paths.
About accounting,
Yeah.
in an accounting standpoint.
I think because of retirement and no new entrants, we're slightly delayed. Hey, so a thing came out in what you're saying, right? A tip, an aspect is keep your fingers on the pulse of your industry, right? So
Yeah,
you have to know what's going on, and
right.
sometimes people may get caught up in their particular role, but they don't understand from a macro perspective what else is going on in their industry. So they're unaware when company X is like, well, layoffs are coming. They don't know. So that's part of I gather that from what the summary that you're saying is like definitely keep your fingers on the pulse at all times. But I have
Exactly.
a question
Go
for
ahead.
you. So this is obviously the Tech Behind FinTech. What if you absolutely love the financial industry and doing technology? You do not want to go to healthcare or another vertical. What would you do then? I mean, what
Well,
are your
you have technology, you have fintech in healthcare. So, you may want to pivot to health tech, or, like you're going to be so this is so for me, obviously, this is the tech side behind the fintech.
yeah?
So when as a technologist, you can pretty much get into whatever. You can get into any vertical that you want. Um, and it may be that a healthcare there's a technology component of the healthcare, which we all know. There's health tech now, there's ed tech, there's all these various versions of tech. So you may, if all the major banks are laying people off in your space, and that's where you live, you may want to pivot for a little while and then come back around, and go to some of these other companies. And I'm not saying that everyone has to be in, brick and mortar hospital type setting. But there's so much in terms of technology is in all of our lives. Like, it's underlying. I call it, the way they teach kids math and reading and math. Like, technology it touches everything we do now. So you can move into other verticals or other industries. And then if you absolutely love banking in a year, or, whenever it kind of picks back up and they're hiring people back again, then switch back over. Another thing that happens in recessions is they'll lay off full-time employees, but the work still has to get done. So you may become a contractor. So you may be a full-time, a lot of people who are full-time employees, they don't even understand the other side. They don't understand how it works when it comes to contracting, or sometimes also called consulting, where you're paid an hourly rate. So in recessions, what happens is, because employees are sometimes the biggest component in a business, they slashed employees, or quote headcount. So you'll have a company that will cut their headcount, but the work still has to get done. The work doesn't go away. So then they hire on a slew of contract workers. And with contract workers, there's no health benefits, there's no other stuff. We just give you a dollar amount, and you take that hourly dollar amount, and you do what you choose to do with it. Some people have made careers out of it because it can be so lucrative. And when you're in the recession, when a recession comes, that tends to happen. So understanding even that, how that works, how contracting works, what it means to be an hourly employee. If you make 100,000, what that means on an hourly, basis, which is usually $50 an hour, give or take. Just understanding that world. That's kind of like getting recession proof, getting kind of recession ready as well.
You know what? I want to dive into that before this. I'm looking at our time, and I think we have about 17 minutes left. I want to dive into that because I think that's huge. Before we do, let's just a comment from the audience. From Bera again. Tech can build the accounting industry, so learning accounting space can add value. So, I mean, back to what Renee's saying. I mean, you're a
Mhm.
technologist at the end of the day. So, looking at different verticals where you can leverage your technology. But I think I, I don't want people to miss that jewel that you just gave, um, in terms of, because literally was just reading, Tesla, they did layoffs, but they're not touching hourly employees or hourly contractors. So, and I just think that's extremely important we harp on that. 'Cause I don't think people fully get that. I've been in different worlds, so I totally get what you're saying, but I want to make sure that lands, for the audience. So let's summarize that, right? Number one, just because a firm is laying people off, that doesn't mean that the work does not still need to get done. Does not mean that they will not hire contractors. I literally seen this happen in '08. Literally watched it happen in '07. Literally saw it. So, what advice would, because not everyone is set up to has a company, or has a situation where you could just start, from a 1099 perspective in terms of getting money to their company or their entity and not themselves. And most people are in a W-2 format. I think there's a big jewel here we can leave the audience with, and I wanna dive into that. What are your how what
Yeah,
do you have for people?
yeah, for absolutely. So if a person, and I think the number used to be $75 an hour. I haven't researched it recently, but I think it was at the $75 an hour mark. You really want to look into having an LLC. So if you are making $150,000 a year, and a Barrett probably is the best person to jump in on this one. There becomes almost like diminishing returns in a way. Like you would earn more taking that 75 bucks an hour yourself as an LLC or as a 1099 employee, and then paying yourself and paying your own taxes, having an accountant like a come in and pay your tax and work on your taxes and things like that. Um, but I'm not sure of the exact number. But if you are, typically a $50 an hour employee or under, it can still be W-2. So you're just an hourly employee instead of being a salaried employee. So hourly means, you have a timesheet, whatever. You're still working for the company. I mean, you're still working at the company. So to make this super easy, I'll give an example. Let's say where you work for example, Tesla, since you brought him up or you brought up that company. So Tesla has full-time employees. Like, okay, we're paying the X person $100,000 per year with benefits, with a bonus structure, or whatever the way companies typically do it. Typically, it's a base salary plus a 10% bonus, 15% bonus, whatever, 25% bonus. And you get health benefits and 401k match and blah, 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 all these other additional benefits. So when you total that all together, that number isn't your salary of 100 plus your, number of 100,000 plus 15%, which would equal 115,000. That number is typically around 2 to 300,000 when it comes to the benefits, the 401k match, all these other things that make up a total compensation. That's why it's called total compensation package. So that total compensation to the company is 300 grand, for example. Now, when the company lays off all these $100,000 people who are actually 300,000 to the company and hires back new people or sometimes the same people for, $50 an hour, they're actually paying that 100,000, not that 300,000. So this is why companies kind of do that. It's a cost saving mechanism. So when the individual the very simplest, easiest thing to do is to just be a W-2 employee. It's simplest. So you would be pretty much doing the same thing, but instead of working for Tesla, you now work for, whatever agency. Some of the big, huge agencies are like Robert Half, Tech Systems, the bigger, behemoth ones. You'll work for them. They are placing you at Tesla. You get your check from them, you send them your timesheet, you do all of that through with them, and then Tesla pays them an amount and they pay you the $50 an hour. That's kind of like as a high level overview how it works. Now, the folks that have been doing it a long time and are pretty sophisticated or make a lot, a significant amount more money, you'll want to have an LLC so that you can get paid. So you can kind of almost cut out the Robert Half, because Robert Half is going to take a piece of that money. So again, I'll give a good example. Instead of paying, the way it works is like, Tesla will give Robert half. Your individual X makes $50 an hour. Tesla is giving Robert half, $55 an hour for their work and effort and getting you processed and your time card and everything and cutting you a check and doing all they need to do. So Tesla would take $5 and then and give you the other 50. Now, when it comes to you as an LLC, what tends to happen is you kind of the middle person, Robert Half, they get less. So instead of Tesla giving Robert half, or Tesla still gives Robert half the 55, but because Robert Half doesn't have to deal with your W-2, your taxes, and all this other overhead, Robert Half will give you 53, and instead of taking $5, they'll take $2. So it kind of, and the more money you make, the more you get in that at the end. So in that case, you want to talk to your accountant about setting up like an LLC and doing all those various things, which are very, very easy to do. I mean, I used to help people do them in the early 2000s, like walk them through, not help them, but actually point them into the right direction. And now everything is online. You can do it and get something, an LLC and stuff set up. And what, Nnamdi, you and I have done these 1,000. Well, let's not talk about that. What, 48 hours, 72 hours, like very quickly.
It's been an interesting journey, both on the entrepreneurial and the employee front. So, yeah. But no, I mean, this is great advice. I mean, I think in hearing everything that you're saying, I think we can stop. I know we're almost at time. I think we could just like summarize it. And one of the major themes I get from this conversation is, as an employee, you have to kind of look at yourself as, number one, you're your own salesperson. And number two, it's almost like you're your own business in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Whether whether you're a W-2, whatever, and then how do you represent that? I mean, hone the skill sets. Obviously, the technology has to be there, but hone the skill sets in selling yourself. And if layoffs do occur, that doesn't mean if your role is a necessity, that doesn't mean they might not contract that out. So why not contract it with the person who knows the firm, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what they do. It's
Yeah.
just what ends up happening. Like they don't have a whole lot of time, especially when your staff is walking out the door. You're just going to reach out to the people that you know. So again, it's all like full circle. The networking, making sure people know who you are. When you are an employee, being a great employee, doing your job, building your skill set, being that person that the leader is like, gosh, I really don't want to lose this person. Like, ugh. And then when they do, if they have to lose you, then if they have a budget to bring on, contract staff, you're the first person that gets the phone call. So you just want to, it's full circle, all of it.
And even based on what you're saying, I don't even know if most people put themselves in a situation to receive that phone call, because usually after the layoff, it may be some bitterness involved. But what I'm learning is, look, these are all business decisions, and just trying to present options, whether they exercise the option or not. But at least you put yourself in a position where you could present, here are some options.
Right. Exactly. Like it's not a lot of the times the managers don't even have depending on the level and how big the company is, you don't even know, your hiring manager may not have the or the person who you directly report to doesn't have the can't say who's staying and who's going, like they don't make that decision. Sometimes it's above their head. It's a lot of times business decisions that are way above a lot of folks' heads. And so you just want to always just be ready, especially now. This is the time to get ready. This is we're in this little bit of a lull. every company isn't doing layoffs. Some companies, like Nnamdi pointed out, you're laying off, slashing in this area, but other companies are hiring, or one side of the company, like I said, one side of the company is laying off, the other side is just hiring like crazy. It's the perfect time to start to, if you haven't connected with people that you've seen in a long time, reconnect with them, ask how everything is going. Just being, you don't want to reach out to a person when you're desperate, when it's just the end. Like, this is what I'm looking for. You haven't spoken to them in 5 years. This happened to me just recently. I was telling Nnamdi about somebody reached out, and it's just like, can you help? And then all of a sudden they become like the person on your phone 17 times. It's just like, look, I haven't heard from you in forever. Now you want my help, and now you're like all over my phone. Like, life has changed, things have happened. So you just don't want to be on that side of it. You want to be the person who is keeping in touch, keeping people abreast of what's happening, touching base before you need something, just
Good advice today, actually. Block out 30 minutes a week just for the exercising of reaching out to people that you haven't heard from. Just email, hey, what's going on? Just block out and just, I'm big on small incremental improvements help you do major things. So I'm huge on that philosophy. So it was just good advice today, and I just I'm just throwing it out there, which it makes sense. Look, hey, talk to your network. What's going on? What's going on? And not asking for anything. I mean, it's the
right.
best. Talk to people when you do not need them. It's just more of a sincere conversation. They get the warm and fuzzies. You get the warm and fuzzies. It's all love.
It's so
So
much better. So much
yeah,
better like that, when you're not like coming in from 8 years ago and asking for someone's expertise. It's just like, you just feel used, because the other side, I'm just, why is this person reaching out all of a sudden? And
well,
what's their story?
years, but you're not asking for anything. It's just, hey, how are you doing?
Oh, yeah. The regular connection, I think, is fantastic. I mean, I tell this. I think I probably talked about my mentee way too much this week, but he is the ultimate. He's the quintessential person at this. Like, he didn't want anything from me. He would just keep me abreast. He actually put something on my calendar once every couple weeks throughout his career. It's been years. It's been like 10, 12 years. I mean, now we're like really great friends, but in the beginning, he would just keep me posted on what was happening in his life. And a lot of it had nothing to do with, so it was always career related, but it wasn't asking me for something specifically. So when he did ask for something specifically, I'm like, of course I'm going to help this person, because now they're like a part of my life. Like, they're all in my, I know everything about them. I'm connecting with them once a month, all that kind of stuff. So do you need to connect with somebody once a month? I don't, probably not, but not from 8 years ago. And then showing up like, hey, can you help me out?
100% agree. Listen, I don't want to know we're almost at time. So, look, thank you very, very much for your time today. Um, Always awesome talking to you. The last time we were on the show was literally
A year
June
ago.
21st, 2021. So literally a year. Hopefully, we don't have to wait another year before getting you back on the show.
Yeah.
But I
I think
really
this was good. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but I didn't get to even get into the meat of the other industries. So maybe we could do a part 2 and talk about, during the summer, and talk through some of the industries, outside of medical. There's so many others that people can really start to look into. Maybe that'll be the homework for the audience, to find the industries that you could feel like you'd be able to pivot into. Because a lot of this work is very similar. you know it's your developing. I mean, the technology is similar across industries. There's some nuances, but a lot of it is a lot of the same work.
Same. So on that note, thank you very much. Last minute shout outs, please, I'll give you the floor to do that. How can people get in
So
contact with you and things of that nature?
LinkedIn, number one place. Renee Brown Small on LinkedIn, or if you Google me, Renee Small, cybersecurity, as my son says, I pop right up. So you can Google me there. But LinkedIn is where you'll find me the most. That's my social media of choice. So you can reach out to me there, and I check my LinkedIn pretty frequently, and I'll respond to to anyone that sends me a note. So definitely would love to continue the conversation.
Unless they send you a note after 8 years asking you for something. Then
And I even responded to that. It was the follow-ups that got on my nerves.
okay, no doubt. Listen, guys. So every Friday we're here at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard, Eastern Daylight, whatever they're calling it now. Live, the Tech Behind FinTech. You can visit us at the techbehindfintech.com and see past episodes. Thank you very much for the comments. Thank you for viewing it, guys, on Instagram. Appreciate you as well. I'll do an Instagram post show wrap up. So stay live. Everyone else, this is where we say have a spectacular weekend. We are out. Renee, once again, thank you for joining. I know you have a 1 o'clock, so I'm not going to ask you to hop on Instagram. Guys, take care.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.